Three of the four Gospels share Christ's parable of the sower who sows good seed in the good soil and the harvest that yields 30, 60, 100-fold. Pillars on Purpose Portraits features next generation leaders with a passion for the gospel and to see the produce of that kind of abundance. Join us for Pillars on Purpose Portraits. Welcome to Pillars on Purpose Portraits. I'm Paul Weber, the founder of Pillars on Purpose, where we convene cross-generational leaders standing together as pillars for faith, pillars in community, and pillars of witness to our world. Joining us today is Andrea Northup. Andrea, thank you so much for joining us on Pillars on Purpose Portraits.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Paul. It's great to be here.
Amen. So Andrea, you're from Colorado. You moved to Arizona to complete your undergraduate studies at Grand Canyon University. You worked at Habitat for Humanity, and now you're back serving at your alma mater, GCU, the largest private Christian university in the world. Tell us, what's your story? Give us a little background. Fill in those blanks.
Oh gosh, that's always a great question and is something that when I reflect on, I continue to see God's faithfulness woven in it again and again. So growing up in Colorado, I grew up in a small town in the northeastern corner named Sterling. And we were descendants of farmers, so grew up going to wheat fields and pulling rye every summer out of those wheat fields. Had livestock during the summer, learned how to sew, learned how to do all sorts of things. It was a lot of fun. So I knew what I didn't want to do. I didn't want to live in Phoenix. Had no idea why I named Phoenix out of all places, but that's what I chose. I didn't want to work at a nonprofit. I didn't want to major in business management, and I wanted nothing to do with fundraising. And so fast forward, when I graduated from Grand Canyon, I had a business degree. I was starting to work at Habitat for Humanity, Central Arizona, and I was on the development or the fundraising team.
So, Andrea, you literally are the person that depicted the phrase, if you want to show, if you want to make God laugh, show him your plan. So
100%.
Your
Yes.
anti-plan was exactly that. It made God laugh because
it did.
He took you as a literal sower, if you will, off the farm in Colorado, moved you to Phoenix, 110 degrees in the summertime, put you into business management, after that, you got into fundraising and nonprofits. I can see a thread here, and I think this is going to tee up our conversation well.
Yes. So it was something where I never imagined myself actually living in the United States after graduating from high school. I'd been passionate about missions, had been to places like Mongolia, Haiti, Mexico, and even during my time at GCU, went to Kenya, lived there for 8 weeks. And so I always pictured myself in some sort of mission field abroad. But then during my time at GCU, my mind shifted, and I began to see how you could have business and have a Christian mindset, and how you could really love your neighbor without crossing a border. And that's what I started to believe, in all honesty. I really started to think that, okay, if I want to love my neighbor, I really have to cross a border. I have to go outside of the US. But really during that season, my heart was convicted. And I was saying, well, if I'm so willing to fundraise, hop on a flight for 36 hours, go to one of the most remote places in the world, and yet I'm unwilling to drive 20 minutes and wake up early on a Saturday morning. Like, what is that really a reflection of Christ's heart posture? And so at Habitat, this is when this is all getting exposed, and my perspective shifted of saying, well, how can I love the hardest parts of my own city? And so that's where I worked at Habitat for about 7 years and started to get into a lot of community development work. And then just about 2 years ago, got hired on at GCU as our assistant director of state and community relations. And I've been in that role since.
So it's kind of come full circle for you. So let's fill in just a few dots as we go here. So you laid out your plan to the Lord. You said no Phoenix, no business, no fundraising, no nonprofits. How did that transition happen? How did you get from Colorado to Grand Canyon and do all the things that you thought you weren't going to do?
it's a great point. So when I was in high school and just starting into my associate's degree, I did an internship at my church in youth ministry. And that's originally too what I thought I was going to do, some sort of international missions or youth ministry. And
Hmm.
during that internship, really, again, talking about perspectives widening, I saw how some of those business skill sets could be helpful in regards to coordinating events, marketing events, just day to day management of the youth finances and things like that. So I thought, maybe I should look at having a business major. But I still struggled with it because I couldn't reconcile how can a Christian be in be a business person with integrity, because we have those scriptures that we fall back on, the root of evil is the love of
Sure,
money.
money is the root of all evil, right?
Yes, there we go. Money is the root of all evil, and you can't love both God and money. And so,
Correct.
in my in some of my previous business classes, I mean, that was business's number one purpose, was to make a profit. And so, I basically said, well, that's the equivalent of loving money. So how can I be a Christian and be a business
Mm.
person at the same time? And so, seeing how some of those skill sets, though, would be helpful, I decided to go the business route. And GCU was one of those places that actually had Christian studies and business, but at an affordable rate. And so it was actually the affordability that drew me into GCU,
Sure.
which I think is a lot of people. But
Well, yes, as a father of five with three attending GCU at one time, I can relate to the affordability question for sure.
oh, you have to, and we can certainly talk about that for a long time. I was the third kid going to college too,
Right,
so right, and you apply for all the things, and when you look at the bottom line, I mean, it just has to make sense.
of course.
So
So let's
com-
um, let's look at great GCU business. Obviously, everything we do as Christians can be to the glory of God, even business. And
mhm,
he doesn't say that money is evil. He says the love of money is evil.
yes,
So it's that
yeah.
pursuit, right? So talk a little bit about your faith background growing up, and as God moved you into sort of doing the things you didn't want to do. How did your faith grow through that season?
That's another good question. So, and thinking back to growing up, I did grow up in a Christian home.
Mm.
And then both of my parents actually came from Christian families as well. That's one of the reasons why my dad's side moved to the US, is they were Christians in Russia that were being persecuted. And so
Oh my.
they sought to live in America. So we definitely have a Christian heritage. But one of the distinct things that stands out to me is that my parents were the same people, regardless of where they were. So if we were at church, if we were at a restaurant, if we were at school, I had the same mom and dad that I had anywhere else. There wasn't this mask that they put on at church. And that was something that was very impactful for me. Like, wow, they really
Sure.
believe this. They're really living it out. It's not just some,
Authenticity.
yes, it's not just some facade.
Hmm.
And there would even be small comments that my mom would make, and my dad too, just when we were out and about, that would continually point us back to why we believe what we believe. And so decided to follow Jesus at a young age of 7,
Mm.
after going to the Awana program. And it was at that moment I was like, no, I haven't trusted Jesus with my life. And so I remember praying in my bedroom of saying, Jesus, I want to follow you. Now, do I fully and did I fully at that point understand what that meant? I'm not sure, but I knew that I needed someone to save me.
Well, I'm
Um,
sure you're an overachiever at 7. I get that. Absolutely. But I'm sure as your life progressed, and you did make it your own, you stepped out in faith. Again,
yes.
you did the things you want to do. You went to GCU. So, talk about that moment of decision where you said, "Okay, Lord, here is what I said. Now, here's what you're causing me to do or leading me to do."
Right. You know, I can distinctly remember being torn. Should I go to GCU or should I not go to GCU?
Hmm.
And at the time, in talking about living abroad, I was actually living in Australia. And I brought this moment forward in my Bible study. And my group leader at the time, he said, "Hey, you can take this for what it's worth. Tell me if it's actually not relevant. But as you're describing your situation and how you're going back and forth and you don't know what to do, I just got this image of a tree being tossed and blown by the wind. And no matter what was thrown at it, it wasn't shaken because of where it was rooted." And that's exactly how I felt. I felt like I had a lot of things being thrown at me, not knowing which direction to go. But because of my faith in Christ, I wasn't going to be shaken. And that gave me the confidence to say yes to GCU and to actually come out here. And we're in my office interviewing, and I actually have the drawing that I did from that moment on my office and my back wall. And so it's just meant to be a constant reminder of no matter what's thrown my direction, how am I going to be rooted in Christ so that I'm not shaken and I'm not uprooted.
What a great word from somebody in your community, kind of affirming this
Yeah.
sense that you had and giving you a peace to kind of live out and trust that next for you, going to
Mm-hmm.
GCU, studying business. So let's transition from that a little bit into this idea of maybe calling,
Mm-hmm.
the calling God's placed on your life, and how that now fits into your vocation. You've served at Habitat for Humanity for several years. You were called back to your alma mater, GCU, and now you're serving in community relations. So, talk a little bit about how God wove that together for you.
Yeah. So when I graduated, again, still had no idea what I wanted to do. The opportunity with Habitat came up. So I decided to take a stab at it. Thought I was only going to be there for 3 months, ended up staying for 7 years. I really was like, should I be in fundraising? Should I not be in fundraising? Well, this is such a great opportunity. I can't say no to this. And I really did stand behind the principles and the fundamentals that Habitat holds of how they partner with families. They give them a hand up, not a handout. They really look at their longevity of saying, yes, we have a purpose in coming along this family, but the goal is for the family to stand at their own, on their own at the end. And so I really believed in that. And just because of my department and also because of my background at GCU, as things progressed, I then was a manager of the GCU Habitat Partnership. So I would go out, yeah, so I would go out consistently multiple times a month with staff and students to serve families, helping repair their homes around campus. And as that time progressed, I just stayed connected with leadership. And so then when the opportunity came, I actually went to an event. They're like, "Hey, we're looking for someone in community relations. If you know of anyone, could you let us know?" And I was like, "Well, wait, I would be interested in that. Can you tell me more about it?" And I was out in the community quite frequently. And even though I was in a development role, again, I had a wrestling moment of, am I stepping out of my bounds? This really isn't fundraising, but I need to know the relationships who are here to help like navigate some of those conversations. We really could elevate this, take it to the next place. But is that my spot? Is that GCU spot? Like, what does that look like? And so when I was hired on as the community relations liaison, all of that went away. It was like, okay, I'm in this role. I'm representing GCU. What do we need to do? And the university's been very passionate about transforming 27th Avenue, which is one of the highest crime areas of the city. And it's known for its prostitution, trafficking, and homelessness. So
Yeah,
that's what
so
we've
let's talk
been
about that for
focusing on.
just a second.
Yeah.
27th Avenue is this community that's really right adjacent to Grand Canyon University's campus. So here you
Yes.
have, and I've had the good fortune of being on 27th Avenue with you in a recent event. We'll get to that in a second. But so here you have this Christian university adjacent to this really troubled area
Mhm.
that needs the Lord for sure. And
Mhm.
and you have decided to try to do something about that. So um, talk about that.
Yeah. So when I stepped in, I was really given a blank canvas.
Mm.
My boss is Dana Shaw, and she's an incredible woman, also incredible Christian faith background, and had blank canvas and said, "Hey, just go to anything and everything and see what surfaces." And so the first 6 months to 8 months, it was just being out in the community, going to different meetings, and hearing what people had to say and just trying to see if there were common threads. Um, and I should also say that as I was out, the reason too why I was even given permission in my role to do that was because from GCU leadership, our president Brian Mueller. I mean, that's the reason why they kept GCU in this neighborhood. I mean, a
Hmm.
lot of people would ask, "Well, why does a Christian university? Why are you guys here?" And um, President Mueller, and along with other leadership, just really believed that if Jesus were to come back, while we have a lot of wonderful parts of the city, he would look to see, well, where are people needing to be served? And so they intentionally kept campus here, intentionally looked for opportunities on how can we provide better jobs, better education, improved safety, and improve families' homes. So this was kind of an addition on what GCU is already doing. But we kind of got to a nexus where the change we were hoping to see wasn't happening. And so
Hmm.
it's what is the reason for that? And so there's a number of things you could say. But I firmly believe that it's, in addition to a physical battle, it's a spiritual battle.
Oh,
And
for sure.
I really think that when going on to 27th Ave for one of those first times and praying, like, Lord, what does it look like to have this area change? And how are we going to bring your presence here? And it was one of those moments where I don't take this lightly, and I don't want to like just like likely say things, but it's almost as if the Lord was saying, "You're going to bring my presence here." And
Mm.
so it's like, what does that mean for us to physically walk into an area and transform it? And so, to your point, Paul, these last 2 years has really been focused on getting to know anyone and everyone on 27th Ave, whether they have a faith background or not. So that's resident leaders, school administrators and school leaders, nonprofits, businesses, the city, really helping create more of a collaborative approach. There's a lot of incredible people doing incredible things, but they weren't necessarily talking to each other at the same table. And so, is how can we bring all those perspectives together, utilize each other's resources and each other's strengths, and then fill in the gaps and identify what vision we're working towards as a community? And
Very
it's been
good.
through those moments we've really seen Christ come alive.
So let's talk about vision for a second, and I want to sort of balance. I'm going to ask you what's the vision that God's given you for your life, and at the same time, I can sense through the conversation what wrongs do you want to right? What wrongs do you want to right, and what's kind of the vision for your life? Would you say?
Man, you're hitting with all the good questions today. Um, so, a vision for my life is really to love Jesus in hard places. And that has developed over time. As said before, originally I thought that was going to places overseas and
Mm-hmm.
loving people in those hard places. But now it's, well, what about my own country and my own city? How am I loving people and places that are hard to love and hard to be in? When looking at the community and wrongs to rate, I think what I would focus on are things that we get angry about. And it's like, am I angry about maybe not having a better car, or maybe holidays not going perfectly, or travel not going perfectly, or am I really grieving the things that God's heart grieves? Am I
Mm-hmm.
getting angry about the things that God's heart gets angry about? And
So you're
so,
asking these reflective questions, both about
yes,
yourself, but also God's giving you this heart to take Christ into hard places. Those hard places are hard for reasons. GCU is adjacent, as you said earlier, to a community that struggles with human trafficking, prostitution, drugs, crime as a result, the wear and tear on that community in general. And you and I walked this community just 2 weeks ago in a prayer walk around this community. So God's put this passion on you, Andrew. I could see it in your through line of your story. You're called to wrong some rights and bring Jesus to that party, if you will.
yes, I would say probably is how are we saying that certain activity is acceptable?
Mm,
So, and not doing anything about it, especially from a Christian background. And so on 27th Ave, we do have a lot of the trafficking and prostitution, and it's very open where you would see a lot of women walking the streets. You would see men picking them up, putting them in their cars, dropping them off. You'd have families um, who would wake up on any given day and actually have to sweep used condoms up off their front yard.
Yeah.
And when you're in neighborhood association meetings and you hear that that's normal, it just, that's what made my heart angry. I was like,
Yeah.
this is not normal. How are we accepting that this is okay? And why aren't we as a church doing something? And so there is again that tension between we want to be safe and we want to step into hard places and love the least of these. So we have to balance that and look at it. But I think sometimes with growing up in the and being passionate about local outreach and missions and things, I think sometimes we limit our local outreach engagement to a weekend project or to a week project.
Right.
And instead of actually being ingrained in the betterment of that community and having a more comprehensive approach, understanding what does it take to make a community thrive, what are things or flags that are causing communities to deteriorate, and how are we as Christians playing into that. And I think it's more than just the community projects, they play into that, but it's how are
Mhm.
we encouraging our members to have businesses that set up in that area and actually employ people of that neighborhood to have them to give them good paying jobs. How can we use jobs? How can we use economics? How are we encouraging people to be educators and strong Christian leaders, even in the public education space?
Right.
Um, and how are we also engaging with our cities? I mean, a lot of times when having that conversation of churches and city, there's almost an automatic separation. But
Hmm.
thankfully, our city of Phoenix here is open to church engagement. And they recognize, hey, we are lacking a sense of community. We need that. So, how can we partner with the church? And so, I think there's so many avenues that as Christians and that as churches, that we can step into that space, have a more comprehensive approach, and actually help those hardest parts of the city to thrive.
Yeah, I noticed when I was with you just 2 weeks ago that the idea of separation of church and state did not apply into that situation. We had wonderful community officers, we had GCU officers, we had the local Phoenix officers, we had a church, a really beautiful church, bilingual church in the heart of 27th Avenue. We had the pastor of that church with us. So when things really get tough in a community, those little phrases that are thrown at us sometimes, separation of church and state, they just go by the wayside. And it's like, let's just serve. Let's just pour ourselves out. And let's demonstrate the gospel in that situation in the hopes that we'll have interaction with people there and be able to share Christ and provide programs and resources to help them become clean, get them off the streets. There was one, and you can quickly tell this story. There's one woman with us who came out of that trafficking life and was there to proclaim Jesus in that community. And what a beautiful story she had about being extricated from that, and what got her into it, and what kept her in it. The fear that her own family was going to be persecuted by these handlers that were trafficking her, that they were going to be persecuted if she didn't stay in the business. I mean, what a tangled web of story that
Yeah.
happens in those kind of places.
Yeah, it's definitely a lot of things overlap, and specifically with Carrie's story, I mean, she will openly say she worked the streets for 12 years, and she was running away from an abusive home. And so she just decided that she was going to leave home and that the streets were better. And then when she no longer wanted to be there, she couldn't leave. While she chose to be there at the beginning, there came a point in time where she did want out, and she wasn't able to get out and was locked in apartments. And then eventually, it was actually the police that knocked down the door and rescued her out of that situation. Yes, and so um, there's a lot of tangled webs, and it does take a lot of partnership. Our prayer walk that morning, it was so neat to see all the different groups coming together specifically because they believed in praying over a neighborhood and interceding on behalf of their city. And but with that being said, I do believe in the power of prayer, and I believe that God is a mighty God. But I also believe we weren't made to be victims. And so, how are we? Yes, how are we on the back end preparing for that? And so, on that event, we intentionally went out with Phoenix PD and GCU PD ahead of time to map out the routes to make sure they drove the area before they sent out people. We did have an officer with each group, so there were safety precautions that we did take, but it was something that was not done before. I mean, there had been groups who had gone out and prayed in the neighborhood, and I want to acknowledge their efforts and their faithfulness. But in regards to hosting a larger event and sending people out and then coming back, and also including students in that, that was the first time.
It
So
was a lot of fun. A lot of fun.
yes,
And
it was
thank
a
you.
lot of
Thank
fun.
you for your work and reaching out to that community. And in the future, Andrea, we're going to do separate podcasts on these ideas, these social issues of human trafficking, prostitution, criminality, drugs, immigration. And I'm sure that you're going to be on it with me, exploring those topics. I'm going to circle back a little bit to you and a portrait about your life. How do you go about sharing your faith with others?
Mhm.
And what does that mean to you? You talked earlier about this happiness and joy to go thousands of miles around the
Mhm.
world to share your faith around the world, but it was hard to go, 5 miles, 10 miles to the local community. How did you overcome that?
Politics, first off, I mean, it does take being aware of, okay, Lord, where am I being hesitant at? Why am I being
Mm-hmm.
hesitant? And one of the things is I realized when going on mission trips, there is such an intentionality that you are preparing your mind, that you're going to be sharing the gospel when you go. So when you're out and about, you're already looking, okay, Lord, who can I share the gospel with? Who can I talk with next? Like, what is
Yeah,
this next opportunity going to bring? And I think when we're here, we get comfortable in our day to day. We just get used to that rhythm. We just get used
mm-hmm.
to going from place to place. And we say, oh, not now. I don't have time for that. Or, I never planned on telling this person, so I'm not going to enter into that conversation. And I realized that I didn't, again, need to be on a mission trip to live life on mission. So, how was I intentionally seeking opportunity in my day to day to be able to share the gospel with people? And also weaving in that excitement or things that I'm going through, just even the people I'm collaborating with out in the community now or in different hobbies on the side. And so I think now it's also that those personal connections, and intentionally asking people if they're going through something hard. Hey, can I pray for you in that? Like, what does that look like? Can I
Sure.
pray for you now? And then also asking the Lord, okay, what is it? What does it look like for me to share my faith with even the people I'm working alongside to change this community? What does that look like? And how can I intentionally seek to be a Christian in the space that you've given?
Well, obviously, people know where you stand. You
Yes.
ooze Jesus through your pores. We can see that, of course. But I like how you said about I'm preparing myself for those opportunities. After all,
Yeah.
we know that it's Jesus that does the saving. We just get to
Yeah.
be a vessel of the message. So if people reject the message, they're rejecting Christ.
Yeah.
It's not a rejection. Well, it can be a rejection of us, but at the same time, we don't have to like lose um, value in ourselves because we weren't successful. I like what you said before that we are victors in Christ. We're not victims. So
Right.
portraying a victorious nature allows us to overcome our personal fear in sharing the gospel and looking for those opportunities, being prepared for those opportunities.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
I'm going to pivot here because I want
Okay.
to I want to chat about something that's near and dear to our hearts here at Pillars on Purpose, and that is breaking down generational barriers.
Mhm.
And we're doing that right here today on this podcast, and I appreciate that. But how can how can millennial Zoomers encourage us boomers? In other words, where does my generation, where does the boomer generation need your spiritual guidance?
Oh, goodness. I think with reflecting on the community development work that I've been in and even some of the work at Habitat, I would say if you are feeling like the Lord has put something on your heart to change and to be a part
Mm,
of, don't wait for people to align with you 100% theologically before being willing to work with them. Um, there's a lot of there's a lot of churches and people of faith that I come in contact with where they don't want to work with other churches, even if they're just a different denomination or if they're a different background of some sort, because they're waiting to agree on everything before they're willing
mm,
to move forward.
hmm
And I think of this, the scripture that comes to mind is who's not against you is for you.
hmm
And if you can agree on Jesus, that he's the way, then hey, move forward. There is some caution to that because you want to be mindful of what gospel is presented. And that's one thing I admire about your generation, Paul. I admire that you guys have strong convictions and you want to stick to them, because I think in my generation, there's some wavering to that. But I do
mm,
think there's sometimes missed opportunity to have an influence in a dark space because we're waiting on our theology to be aligned before we're waiting to be a light in the darkness.
mm. Very, very, very good. I'll treasure that personally and reflect on that as well with my peers. How about what pitfalls do you see in our generation, the older generations, that would cause us to be seen as hypocritical? Like, what are the kind of things you'd like to suggest that we stop doing?
Oh gosh.
I have an idea. It's probably is they say that love, true love, is the balance of grace and truth.
Yeah.
And I will just confess, as a Jersey guy, as a boomer, sometimes I come a little hard with the truth and a little soft with the grace. So maybe that maybe that's one thing that sort of gives us a little bit of a hypocritical bent as boomers. But I'll let you amplify that. How's that?
I appreciate the truth, because I think sometimes in my generation we are so focused on how are we compassionate, how are we being
Hmm
loving towards others, and I think we've actually come to a place where compassion is actually being taken out of proportion and it's being manipulative. And so I see that in the community space, and so I think um, in order to have a flourishing community, you need both compassion and enforcement, or those truths. And
Mm,
so I think the truths need to be shared, but also at the same time, okay, how can we balance that of saying the truth in love, and then for my generation to say, okay, your heart and your feelings don't dictate everything, and how are you using the renewing of your mind and the truth that you know to actually speak into this situation and change the outcome of it, because your feelings
mm.
don't know it all. Your heart's deceitfully wicked above all things. So,
Well, you anticipated my question of you, so I gave you two questions that could kind of, you know, what could you boomers stop doing and start doing, and then I was going to ask you a question, and you beat me to the punch. I actually like that you did that. Um, our generation, the boomer generation, sees the younger generations just really full of passion and engaged and willing to volunteer in things that, frankly, we would never think to do, and that is a beautiful thing. Keep doing that. At the same time, balance the truth in there a little bit more.
oh, it's so true, Paul. And I think I if I could emphasize on that, I think again, being in community development and with working with younger generations at a university, there is a deep passion to serve, and I found that so admirable. But then also at the same time, we do have to know um, what are certain foundational truths that we are founded on, because there's a lot of things, even in the community development space, that are labeled as helping people. And they're really not helping people. They're enabling them, and you're not changing their lives. It's not transformative. And so we have to come with a strong foundation, but also a sense of humility and willingness to learn from others. So I mean, we need both. We need the truth. We also need the love, and how can those interact and balance each other out?
See, we agree on so much across generations. That's what the power of the Holy Spirit does for us. Amen. All right.
Amen.
In our closing moments, how do you see Pillars on Purpose being a support to your God calling and your legacy? How can Pillars on Purpose be a support to you?
When we originally were talking about Pillars on Purpose, one of the things that attracted me was continuing to build up the next generation. So learning
Mhm.
from your wisdom um, and other older people's wisdom. Sorry, yeah, you already know that. I'm not
You
breaking
can
it.
just call it. You can call it for what it is. I get that.
No problem. Well, so I think there's a lot of wisdom that we can gain from that. But I also think how are we coaching up leaders and mentoring them to confidently bring Christ into the spheres that they're influencing? And one of the questions that I think back on was from an individual I met. Her name was Meredith King, and she is also a veteran in the community development space. And we are going back and forth on hard questions. And one of the things I brought to her was like, well, do I bring this forward? I don't know where to stand on this because it kind of goes against my values that I have with my faith and as a Christian. And she's like, well, Andrea, you have to decide, are you a Christian first? Or
Mm.
are you a liaison in the community development space first? And so that's one thing that I had been reflecting on this last year. Like, no, I'm a Christian first. Now, how does that influence my work in the community development space? And so I valued her perspective. I value your perspective. I think that it's important that we're passing the wisdom on from one generation to the next, rather than asking ourselves a question of like, why aren't these young kids doing anything? And why aren't they believing the right stuff? And, why aren't they living out their faith? It's like, well, are we intentionally pouring into them and building them up to be the
Hmm.
leaders in those
Amen.
spaces? So anyway, I so value Pillows on
That
Purpose and the work you guys are doing.
that's why we're here. That's why we're here. Now, I'm going to turn the tables on you a little bit. The last
Okay.
question here is: how can you help strengthen Pillars on Purpose to make an impact on the community? How can you pour into us?
I would love to continue to challenge the space of what local outreach is. And even as we were talking about in some of our previous conversations on the back end of what does it look like for foreign aid for the US,
Hmm.
um, just coming from that perspective of being out boots on the ground in the community. I'm in my office today, but I'd say probably about 50% of my time is out spent in the community talking with people. So I'd love to bring that perspective on what does healthy community development look like, not just for 27th Avenue, but for our nation as a whole. And I'd love to be able to bring encouragement to people who are in hard spaces and saying this, like, just you might be encountering challenges, you might be encountering hard things, but we follow a God who is victorious, and we follow a God who triumphs over all evil and over all darkness. And I've seen the pit of it, and I've seen him triumph over it all.
Well, you're hitting on exactly why Pillars on Purpose is here. It's we are working together cross generationally to know God
Yeah.
and develop a deeper relationship with Him in community, to stand firm on His word, and that also encompasses whatever you do for the least of me, these you've done for me, and then
Right.
to take action in love, working to balance truth and grace that we can
Yes.
do in community together, right? And cross generationally, balance that truth and grace so that we can be pillars for faith, pillars in community, and pillars of witness to our world. Well, Pillar, Andrea Northup, thank you so much for being with us today. Thank you so much for your passion and the joy that you bring to these conversations. This conversation with me brought me a lot of joy, and
Thank you,
I'm
Paul.
just blessed to be with you today. So thank you.
Awesome. It was my pleasure, and it was an honor to be here with you.
Mm-hmm. Thanks also to the man behind the curtain, our producer Steve O, as always, and thanks to you, our audience. Your support allows us to build this cross-generational community of pillars. Your support also helps keep us on the platforms, and you can find us at Apple, Spotify, and YouTube, as well as pillarsonpurpose.com. Pillars on Purpose is a tax-deductible 501c3 ministry convening cross-generational leaders, as I said, as pillars for faith, pillars in community, and pillars of witness to our world, because here at Pillars on Purpose, we envision a world anew through the inspired few, like Andrea, who reach the many to proclaim the one. Thank you for being with us.